Do we understand what faith is? I know you can turn to the book, the whole chapter deals with faith. But what is faith and where do we stand where faith is concerned? Remember, it was only Jesus that came full of grace and truth. That is not where we were concerned in the history of our people before the Second Testament. Grace and truth came through Jesus. You can call him Jesus Christ if you want, but it came through Jesus. What were we living by before? We were living by our faith. And by our faith, the whole world could be saved. If we understand our faith and how to deal with our faith. Our faith has given us grace so that we can give that. The last time I was here, I read a little bit about what is written in Ephesians, the 2nd chapter. Because everything in this book deals with me and you. Every chapter, every verse, every book. You don't have to write a sermon when you're coming up here. If they're stealing the words, they need to write the sermon. But this book belongs to me like it belongs to you. If you point out to me one Christian in this Bible, I would leave here and I would go somewhere in that book. I think I have $5. I will give you my last $5. Point out one Christian in this book. And if you can't find any, get to understand what's happening with our lives. I want to tell you something. Listen carefully. This is how it works. And this has nothing to do with my political background or anything. It's facts because it's been proven to be. The more you get people to serve your God, is the more you've been blessed. Abu Bakr tried to get people convert or die. Today, the Muslims are growing and you can't stop it. Christians, when they enslaved you, you were not supposed to know how to read and write. You just listen to them talking about Jesus. So you get out of that garbage and you steal with Jesus. Jesus is our brethren. He's an Israelite. He's not a God, but you believe because there's no understanding of the teachers of this doctrine because they are not Israelites. Therefore, they cannot understand. I can see a book of Spanish and I will understand nothing in it. But a Spaniard would. Me, being Israelite, I'm supposed to understand what's in there. Because from Genesis to Revelation deals with my people, my blood. My parents, my grandparents, and all that is in it deals with that from Genesis to Revelation. And if we don't feel that pain, we'll never be good Israelites. We'll continue to be hitting at each other all the time because we look like strangers to each other. But we're not. We need to understand that we have the same bloodline. I don't care what anybody says. The same bloodline. I don't care how you mix with anything because, you know what? Most rebels that have led a lot of revolution about slavery, especially those that I know, my heroes, they never fought against the white man. I want for you to know that. It is a conspiracy all the time for black people to say about a white man. They fought against Christianity. Christianity gave you the cherry tree on your back. Christianity threw you overboard. And who were the Christians? The white man was the Christian. But who was the KKK? He was the Christian. Everybody. the spirit that moved man, that spiritual force has to be something bigger than a man. And what is it that moved a man to do all the cruel things to the black man? It was Christianity. Whether the man that did it, it was a Christian man that did it. Therefore the fight should go to the Christian and not to the man. We have to be taught how to hate. We didn't come with some sort of a mechanism that automatically we can't like that person or like that person. What happened? We were called animals. We were called coons. We were called blacks. We were called Negroes. We don't have a name. I'll tell you something. I'm going to go to Psalms 44. We have heard with our ears, O God, our fathers have told us what work thou did in their days, in the times of old. How thou didst drive out the heathen with thine hand and planted them. Now thou didst afflict the people and cast them out. For they got not the land in possession by their own sword, neither their own arm saved them, but thy right hand and thine arm, and the light of thy countenance, because thou art a favor unto them. Thou art my king, O God. Command deliverance for Jacob. Now who could say that they are the children of Jacob? Who can say that? When we understand everything about Jacob in Genesis 32 and 35, who can say that all these things at a core is to prove that there's somebody else that is of God and not us? Of course we're not of God because we don't carry out what God wants us to do. It's like you got a child and the child is wayward, bad, but it's still your child. The God of Israel said, I'm married to you in the book of Jeremiah. He can't separate himself from you. He's the keeper of covenant. We have the creed. We're the teacher of the Gentiles. He was so sorry for his people. He cried. Broken hearted. I can understand that. That's how many times do I feel that same pain, trying so desperately to talk to people so happy and full of joy. I'm sure you've experienced this. To talk to people about your God. Talk to people about the power of knowledge. You understand. Why can't they understand? And that's a power within itself. How can't you understand? Look, it's right there. Lamentation 4:8 said the visage is blacker than a coal. Visage in French means face. How is it that someone can take that and turn it around? Where is the power of your teachings? The power of your knowledge? It's a kingdom of priests, not one person to teach. I said this morning, and I'll repeat it again. We are fully qualified. Those of you who have crossed over are fully qualified. Don't ask me for a program. Oh, I need help. You can do it yourself. And we're equipped that whensoever we shall call upon his name, I know he'll be there to answer based on your life, based on your living, based on all the things that have the cure, the substance for true life in Israel.
The Battle of Bamber Bridge was a significant but often overlooked event in World War II history that took place in the small village of Bamber Bridge in Lancashire, England, on the night of 24th to 25th of June, 1943. It was not a traditional battle, but rather a violent confrontation between Black American soldiers and white American military police, MPs, rooted in racial tensions within the segregated U.S. Army. During World War II, the U.S. military was racially segregated. Black soldiers often served in support units and faced systemic discrimination from white officers and MPs. Many Black American troops were stationed in Britain, where local civilians were generally more accepting and less racially prejudiced than their American counterparts. British pubs and towns did not practice racial segregation, which created friction with the racially discriminatory attitudes of the U.S. Army authorities. The 1511th Quartermaster Truck Regiment, the black soldiers involved were part of this logistics unit, stationed at Bamber Bridge, where they were generally welcomed by the local English population. On the evening of 24th of June 1943, some black soldiers went to a local pub, Ye Old Hob Inn, to relax after a long day. According to reports, white MPs arrived at the pub and tried to arrest one of the black soldiers for being out of uniform, technically for minor infractions. The white British locals in the pub, who were friendly with the black soldiers, resisted the MPs' attempts to enforce American-style racial segregation, reportedly telling the MPs, "They're as good as you are." The MPs called for reinforcements, leading to a tense situation that escalated when one black soldier was shot and injured by the MPs. This caused outrage among the black troops. Black soldiers returned to their base, broke into the armory, and armed themselves. A firefight ensued between the black soldiers and white MPs. British civilians largely sided with the black soldiers, with some even providing support or encouraging them to stand their ground. Private William Crossland, a black soldier, was killed during the confrontation. Both black soldiers and white MPs sustained injuries, though exact numbers vary in different accounts. Some property was damaged in the firefight, and the event caused a significant scandal within the U.S. military hierarchy. Dozens of black soldiers were court-martialed, though there was no punishment for the MPs or white officers involved. The incident led to an investigation that criticized the poor leadership and excessive racism in the ranks of the U.S. Army. While the battle didn't end segregation, it prompted some improvements in the way black troops were treated. It also contributed to the broader discussion that eventually led to President Truman's 1948 executive order desegregating the U.S. military. The Battle of Bamber Bridge is emblematic of the racial tensions that black American troops faced during World War II, even while fighting for democracy abroad. The event is an example of how international environments sometimes exposed and challenged the racial injustices prevalent in American society at the time.
June 24th, 1943, 10:30 p.m. The summer sun has only just set over Lancashire. Inside Ye Old Hob Inn in Bamber Bridge, a village of stone cottages and narrow lanes, the air is thick with cigarette smoke and the murmur of conversation. Private William Crossland of the 1511 Quartermaster Truck Regiment leans against the bar. He is black, he is American, and for the first time in his life, he is being served a pint without question. The barmaid slides the glass across the worn oak. She smiles. Crossland smiles back. Outside, a jeep pulls up. Two white military policemen step out, their armbands crisp, their batons ready. They have orders from an army that has shipped Jim Crow across the Atlantic and expects England to comply. One of them pushes through the door. He scans the room, sees the black soldiers drinking alongside British civilians, laughing with local women, sharing tables with white British servicemen. His jaw tightens. You men are in violation of segregation policy. The pub falls silent. And then, a voice from behind the bar, a woman's voice, calm, clear. There's no segregation in this pub, love. To understand what happens next, to understand why a quiet English village would become the site of the only mutiny by American troops on British soil during the Second World War, you have to understand what happened when Jim Crow met John Bull. The first black American soldiers arrived in Britain in May 1942. They came as part of Operation Bolero, the massive buildup of American forces preparing for the eventual invasion of occupied Europe. By the summer of 1943, approximately 130,000 African American servicemen were stationed across England, Scotland, and Wales. They drove trucks. They loaded ammunition. They built airfields and depots. They were the logistical backbone of the American war machine in Europe, and they were almost entirely segregated from their white counterparts. The United States Army in 1943 operated under a rigid system of racial separation. Black soldiers slept in separate barracks. They ate in separate mess halls. They were commanded almost exclusively by white officers. And when they went into town on leave, the Army expected them to stay in their designated areas, away from white troops, away from white women, away from anything that might blur the lines that America had drawn. But Britain had no such lines. The British had their own prejudices. Their empire was built on racial hierarchy, and the color bar existed in certain establishments. But there was no legal segregation, no signs reading whites only, no tradition of lynching. And when ordinary British people, farmers, shopkeepers, factory workers, publicans, encountered black American soldiers for the first time, most of them simply saw soldiers, allies, men far from home, fighting the same enemy. The War Office in London understood immediately that this would be a problem. In the autumn of 1942, General Dwight D. Eisenhower's headquarters issued guidance, carefully worded, deliberately vague, suggesting that British civilians should respect American customs. The implication was clear. The Americans wanted segregation enforced. They wanted pubs designated for white troops and pubs designated for black troops. They wanted British women to understand that socializing with black GIs was inappropriate. The British government, caught between its alliance with America and the values it claimed to be fighting for, issued its own guidance. A memorandum circulated to regional commissioners and police forces in September 1942. It acknowledged the gruesome history of racial violence in America. It urged British citizens to be tactful, to avoid causing friction, but it stopped short of endorsing segregation. Home Secretary Herbert Morrison was blunt in private. Britain would not legislate American racism onto British soil, and so the policy was left to ordinary people, publicans and shopkeepers, farmers and factory girls, to decide for themselves how they would treat these men in uniform. Most of them decided Jim Crow could stay on the other side of the Atlantic. Private Eugene Babb arrives in Liverpool in early 1943. He is 22 years old from rural Georgia. He has spent his entire life navigating the invisible walls of segregation, knowing which water fountains he could drink from, which sidewalks he had to step off of when a white person approached, which looks at a white woman could get him killed. He expects England to be the same, maybe worse. Instead, he walks into a pub in a small village outside his base. He hesitates at the door. A white British soldier waves him over. "Come on then, Yank. First round's on me." Babb doesn't move. The Englishman laughs. "We're not like them," he says. "You're a lot. The white ones. They told us we shouldn't drink with you, so we told them to bugger off." Babb sits down. Later, he will write to his mother, "The people here treat us like we're just people." That letter survives. Hundreds like it survive. Testimonies from black GIs who experienced for the first time in their lives something approaching equality. They danced with English women at village halls. They were invited into homes for Sunday dinners. Children asked them for chewing gum, the same as they asked the white soldiers. One veteran recalled years later, "They treated us royally. I thought I'd died and gone to heaven." But the white military police, they had different orders. The 1511 Quartermaster Truck Regiment is stationed at Adams Hall, a camp just outside Bamber Bridge. The men are truckers, specialists in moving supplies from the Yvres ports to the depots that will feed the eventual invasion of France. They work long hours. They are essential. And when they go into the village on their nights off, the locals welcome them. Bamber Bridge is a working-class community. Mill workers, miners, people who know what it means to be looked down on by those who consider themselves superior. When the American High Command suggests that local pubs should operate segregated hours, black troops on certain nights, white troops on others, the publicans refuse. Some go further. When told that black soldiers should be banned entirely from their establishments, several pub owners post signs in their windows, hand-painted, defiant. Black troops only. The message is clear. If you're going to force us to choose, we choose them. June 24th, 1943. The night is warm. The war feels far away. Private William Crossland and several other men from the 1511 are drinking at Ye Old Hob Inn. They've been here before. The staff knows them. The locals know them. There is no tension until the MPs arrive. The confrontation begins over what the MPs describe as a uniform violation. A soldier without his pass, a cap worn incorrectly, the kind of minor infractions that are often overlooked for white troops, but become pretexts for harassment when the soldiers are black. Corporal Roy Windsor refuses to come with them. Words are exchanged. The situation escalates. One of the MPs draws his baton. A local woman, accounts vary on exactly who, steps between them. Leave them alone. More locals gather. British soldiers drinking in the pub stand up. The atmosphere shifts. The military police are outnumbered and they know it. They leave, but they radio for reinforcements. Meanwhile, word spreads back to Adams Hall. The men hear that their brothers have been attacked, that MPs have beaten soldiers at the Hob Inn, that the locals are in danger. The story is exaggerated, but the fear is real. These men have seen what happens in America when black soldiers stand up to white authority. They've heard the stories from home. Soldiers lynched in uniform, black veterans murdered for daring to return from the First War, expecting to be treated as men. They do not know what will happen in England. They only know that their friends are in trouble. Several dozen men gather weapons, rifles from the camp armory. Some legally drawn. They are truckers, and truckers are armed to protect their convoys. Others, acquired in the chaos, they march toward the village. 11:30 p.m. The streets of Bamber Bridge are quiet, but not for long. A convoy of jeeps carrying white MPs rolls into the village. They are armed. They are expecting trouble. What they find is something the American Army has never faced on British soil. A group of black soldiers, estimated between 30 and 50 men, is moving through the streets. They are looking for the MPs who attacked their friends. They are armed. They are angry. The first shots are disputed. American military records claim the black soldiers fired first. Eyewitness accounts from the village suggest otherwise. What is certain? Within minutes, Bamber Bridge has become a combat zone. Bullets punch through windows. They scar the brick facades of the NatWest Bank and the shop fronts along Station Road. The cracks are found in the woodwork decades later, preserved by time, forgotten by history. Private William Crossland, the same man who had been drinking peacefully just hours before, is shot. He collapses on the pavement outside the Old Hob Inn. A British civilian drags him to cover. He dies before dawn. The firefight lasts approximately 2 hours. It ranges across the village, through streets and back gardens, past the church, along the canal. At one point, MP Sergeant Frederick Mills commandeers a truck and drives through the area, shouting for calm. He is shot in the neck. He survives, barely. By 1:30 in the morning, military reinforcements have sealed off Bamber Bridge. The black soldiers, outnumbered and outgunned, begin to surrender. 32 men are taken into custody. 1 is dead. 7 are wounded. 4 of them military police. The Battle of Bamber Bridge is over. The aftermath is swift and one-sided. Within weeks, courts-martial convene. 32 black soldiers face charges ranging from mutiny to attempted murder. The proceedings are closed. The defense is limited. The outcome is predetermined. No white MPs are charged. No investigation examines whether excessive force by the military police triggered the violence. No inquiry questions the segregation policies that created the conditions for conflict. The sentences range from 3 months to 15 years of hard labor. Private First Class Lynn Adams, one of the convicted soldiers, receives 8 years. He has no record of previous offenses. He will serve his time, and then he will be discharged. He never speaks publicly about what happened. Most of them never do. But the people of Bamber Bridge remember. In the days after the incident, villagers are questioned by military investigators. Their testimony is consistent and damning for the MPs. Pub owner Mrs. Kathleen Burkett tells investigators that the black soldiers were well-behaved, polite customers, that the MPs were aggressive, that the locals saw no reason to treat American soldiers differently based on the color of their skin. A local shopkeeper, her name lost to records, is asked why she served black troops. Her answer is simple: because they asked nicely. The military buries the incident. It does not appear in contemporary newspapers. Wartime censorship ensures that stories of American troops fighting each other never reach the public. It becomes a rumor, a whispered story, a memory passed down in families but never officially acknowledged. The broader context is no less troubling. The Battle of Bamber Bridge was not an isolated incident. Throughout 1942 and 1943, violent clashes between black and white American soldiers erupted across Britain, in Manchester, in Bristol, in dozens of smaller towns and villages. The American Provost Marshal's records document over 100 racial incidents involving black troops in 1943 alone. In most cases, the pattern was the same. Black soldiers attempting to use public facilities, white MPs enforcing segregation with batons and pistols, local civilians caught in between, often siding with the black troops. General Benjamin O. Davis Sr., the first African-American general in the United States Army, toured Britain in 1943 to assess morale among black troops. His report was damning. He documented systemic discrimination, arbitrary enforcement of minor infractions, and a consistent pattern of black soldiers being punished more harshly than white soldiers for identical offenses. His recommendations for reform were largely ignored. The army that landed at Normandy in June 1944 was still segregated. The men who drove the supplies, built the roads, and buried the dead were still kept separate from those who received the glory. But something had changed in the minds of the men who served. The black soldiers who passed through Britain carried something home with them, a memory of a place where they were treated as human beings, a proof of concept, evidence that segregation was not natural, not inevitable, but a choice that ordinary people, English farmers and barmaids and shopkeepers, had simply refused to make. Private Eugene Babb, the young man from Georgia who had been amazed that a white Englishman would buy him a drink, survived the war. He returned to America in 1945. He joined the civil rights movement. He marched, he organized, he voted. When asked why he believed change was possible, he had a simple answer: because I saw it in England. The United States Army was officially desegregated by Executive Order 9981 on July 26, 1948, signed by President Harry S. Truman. It was the first major federal civil rights action since Reconstruction. Veterans of the Second World War, men who had fought fascism abroad only to return to Jim Crow at home, were at the forefront of the movement that made it possible. The Battle of Bamber Bridge did not cause desegregation. No single incident did, but it was part of a larger pattern, a pattern of black soldiers discovering that the rules they had lived under were not universal laws, but local tyrannies, tyrannies that could be resisted, tyrannies that could be changed. June 24th, 2023, 80 years later. A small crowd gathers outside Ye Olde Hab Inn. The building still stands, its stone walls unchanged, its windows looking